President Biden says the leader of the Islamic State group, Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi, has been killed during a raid by US special forces in the Syrian province of Idlib. Reports say he detonated a bomb at the start of the operation. The First Minister of Northern Ireland has resigned in protest at post-Brexit trade rules, which his Democratic Unionist Party bitterly opposes. London and Brussels signed the accord introducing checks to avoid creating a hard border on the island of Ireland. Diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions in Ukraine continue. On a visit to Kiev, Turkey's President Erdogan has offered to broker talks between Russia and Ukraine. And on the eve of the official opening of the Beijing Winter Olympics, the head of the International Olympic Committee has criticised countries who decided on a political boycott of the Games.
We start with breaking news out of the United States. President Joe Biden has announced American forces have successfully taken off the battlefield the leader of the Islamic State militant group. The statement says the counterterrorism operation took place in northwestern Syria. It adds, thanks to the skill and bravery of our armed forces, we have taken off the battlefield Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi, the leader of ISIS. It also said all military personnel returned safely from the operation. Turning now to the coronavirus situation here in Japan, the government is expanding quasi-emergency measures as infections continue to spread across the nation. The total number of infections since the pandemic started has topped 3 million. Officials across Japan reported more than 90,000 cases on Thursday for the second consecutive day. 911 people are in serious condition. That's up 25 from Wednesday. Tokyo reported more than 20,000 new infections for the second day in a row. Experts monitoring the situation in the capital say the medical system is under serious strain. They say that's partly because many healthcare workers have caught the virus or become close contacts of infected people. The spike comes in spite of quasi-emergency measures. They're in place in 34 of Japan's 47 prefectures. The government plans to add the western prefecture of Wakayama. The quasi-emergency restrictions are expected to come into force there on Saturday. They include asking bars and restaurants to close early and not to serve alcohol. The surge in new infections is also putting a burden on local governments. Officials in the western city of Osaka say they were slow to report more than 10,000 cases because they could not enter the huge volume of data into a computer system quickly enough. They also say they had a technical glitch. Chinese President Xi Jinping says his country is ready to make the Beijing Winter Games a success. He made the remarks during a video message to an International Olympic Committee session one day before the opening ceremony.
The world is turning its eyes to China, and China is ready. We will do our best to deliver to the world a streamlined, safe, and splendid games, and act on the Olympic model of faster, higher, stronger, and together.
Beijing is the first city to host both the Summer and Winter Olympics. IOC President Thomas Bach said the upcoming games will help make winter sports more popular and profitable in China.
From this tremendous growth, the winter sport industry across the globe will greatly benefit because of the high demand for infrastructure, equipment, and expertise.
Bach was full of praise for what he called the meticulous preparation of anti-coronavirus measures. He also mentioned the dark clouds of the growing politicization of sport. This was an apparent reference to the diplomatic boycott by the United States and other countries in response to alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Bach stressed the Olympics could play a role in overcoming differences, saying the IOC has been working hard to preserve the Games' unifying mission. The head of the Japanese Olympic delegation says team members are excited for the competition and will repay the support of fans with good performances. Japan is sending 124 athletes to the Games. That's a record for the country at the Winter Olympics held overseas.
Our team will compete fairly and seriously until the very end. We want to put in our best performances to show gratitude to our supporters.
Ito also said a Japanese skier who tested positive for the coronavirus on Tuesday had since tested negative twice and was allowed to return to the Olympic Village. The head coach of Japan's speed skating team tweeted on Thursday he had tested positive. Johan de Witt took part in the team's practice on Monday, but so far no skaters have tested positive. Now the Beijing Games will officially kick off with Friday's opening ceremony, but some competitions are already underway, including women's ice hockey, where one of the tournament favorites got off to a perfect start. Second-ranked Canada crushed Switzerland 12-1 in the first game of the preliminary round. 21-year-old Sarah Fillier opened the scoring just 64 seconds into her Olympic debut. Canada is looking to retake the top spot after losing the 2018 final to the United States. That broke a streak of 4 consecutive golds in the event. In the other group, Japan started its campaign with a victory over Sweden. Koike Shiori gave Japan the lead in the first period before Sweden drew level in the second. But Japan added 2 goals in the final period to secure a 3-1 victory. Well, ice hockey is one of the most watched sports at the Winter Olympics, but here in Japan, the fastest game on ice has never taken off in a big way. NHK World's Chris Corday shares the story of a team that's helping to build a home for hockey in Tokyo.
The jerseys all sport the symbol of Canada, but this is hockey night in suburban Tokyo.
We got a mix of some Canadians, Americans, some local Japanese, and it feels good to have that little thing from home, so to speak. Yeah, playing hockey.
Okay, guys, let's go.
A group of expats formed the Tokyo Canadiens 26 years ago. They shared a passion for hockey in a city where it's not a big thing.
Hockey community here is like such a small, so pretty much we know everyone.
These are competitive players, but this is not professional hockey. Their goal is just to play games and make connections. The Canadiens' captain is an American who came to Tokyo 16 years ago. The friends he's made through hockey have helped make it his home.
I think the team has a different meaning for each member. For me personally, when I came to Japan, I didn't know anyone, didn't have any friends, any family, and the team became my family here in Japan.
At the start, the club was focused on traveling outside Japan and charity work. In Thailand, they played a lot of hockey, but they also sponsored an orphanage and supported kids, including one girl who they helped for years as she went through school.
Part of it is the tournaments overseas is to play in countries like Thailand, etc., where we can actually make more of an impact, not just hockey.
These days, the team has 40 players who get on the ice as often as they can. Organizing hockey in Tokyo isn't easy. There are only about 5 or 6 rinks in the entire city. Ice time is very expensive, and it's hard to find the players who have the skills to keep up. But there is homegrown talent. Many of the players are Japanese who lived overseas and played high-level hockey, like Shu Hayakawa. When he moved back from Toronto, he didn't want to hang up his skates.
I had to find a way to play hockey in Japan since I came back. It's a great atmosphere to be here because everyone shares the same hobby.
Satoshi Kumagai grew up playing hockey in northern Japan, where it's a bit more popular. What do you love about hockey?
Just the speed and physical, like lots of contact. I love fighting too.
Fighting and hitting are not a part of these games, but the team is in a different fight to find places to play. A number of rinks have shut in Tokyo. The ones left are shared with other ice sports like figure skating. They've held tournaments with other Japanese teams to help promote hockey, but they say without rinks, it's hard for it to grow.
I guess the best thing that could happen for Japan and for the hockey community is if there was a way to get more rinks to open and spread the game.
It's one of those sports that, once you get hooked on it, it's very hard to play other sports. And, I think, one day maybe we'll have more kids playing, I hope, yeah.
They're helping with that on a small scale. Some players have kids who were born in Tokyo and they're learning to play. One is now old enough to join their games. Another generation with big skates to fill. Chris Corday, NHK World, Funabashi.
The foreign ministers of Japan and South Korea have shared their concerns about North Korea's nuclear and missile development. They agreed to work closely towards solutions. Japanese Foreign Minister Hayashi Yoshimasa held talks over the phone Thursday with his South Korean counterpart Chung Wi-yong. They spoke after a series of North Korean missile launches. They shared serious concerns about the North's nuclear and missile development, and they affirmed Japan and South Korea will work closely together and in a framework including the United States. The talks also came after Japan's government recommended to UNESCO that a group of primarily gold mines on Sado Island in the Sea of Japan be registered as a World Cultural Heritage Site. Chung lodged a protest against the move, insisting Koreans were forced to work at the mines on the island in Niigata Prefecture during World War II. Hayashi said Japan cannot accept South Korea's claim, which he called regrettable, groundless, and based only on the country's own story. Hayashi said he intends to discuss the matter with the South Korean side calmly and politely to have the mines registered as a World Cultural Heritage Site. Several of Afghanistan's public universities have reopened to female students for the first time since the Taliban took power last August. The move comes after international calls to ensure all women in the country can receive an equal education. The Taliban-run Education Ministry said it reopened 8 public universities on Wednesday, including one in the eastern province of Nangarhar. Taliban fighters looked on as female students headed to classrooms in the black robes demanded by the Education Ministry. Male and female students attended class separately, in line with the Taliban's gender segregation requirement. Officials say the remaining universities will reopen to both men and women on February 26th. Secondary schools remain closed to girls. The Taliban had earlier said they would create a better environment for female education within the framework of Islamic teachings. Next in weather, severe winter weather is tightening its grip across much of the United States. Our meteorologist Sayaka Mori explains the situation in our World Weather Report.
Hello there. A long winter storm is pummeling many places in North America, from Mexico through the United States, all the way up into Canada. And there are many warnings in place in the United States at this moment. For example, there are winter storm warnings, ice storm warnings, high wind warnings, and also wind chill warnings in place for parts of the southern and eastern United States. And lots of snow has already piled up in Chicago. About 30 centimeters fell in 24 hours, the heaviest in about 12 months. Take a look at this video from the city. A massive winter storm caused heavy snow in Chicago on Wednesday. Many schools were closed, and children took advantage of the snow and enjoyed sledding in Chicago's Warren Park. More snow is possible for the eastern and southern areas of the United States into the next couple of days. And there's a possibility of nearly 5 millimeters of ice accumulation even in the city of Houston. Be careful of treacherous road conditions. Temperatures are going to be below normal, of course. Chicago -4 degrees and -7 in Toronto on your Friday. Still on the warmer side in the U.S. capital, but it's going to be cooler as we go into the weekend. 21 in Los Angeles with sunny weather. We have been talking about this cyclone called Batinai, which is an intense tropical cyclone. It has dumped more than 700 millimeters of rainfall over Reunion, and more rain is expected. In fact, the center is expected to move over Madagascar from Saturday into Sunday. This area is still dealing with the recovery efforts from Tropical Cyclone Anna. Additional rain is definitely not good news. A heavy snow band is developing over the Sea of Japan. It's called Japan Sea Polar Air Mass Convergence Zone, or simply JPCZ, and that is expected to hit the Hokuriku region. So an additional 1.6 meters of snow is the forecast into the weekend. That's it for me. Have a nice day.
3,300. What are we talking about here? 3,300 American soldiers at risk of immediate discharge for refusing COVID-19 vaccines. That is according to the U.S. Army. We knew some of this was coming. Some companies as well let folks go because they didn't want to get the vaccine.
And all this as we're approaching a pretty grim milestone, 900,000 COVID-19 related deaths here in this country. And there was a study done in the UK that talks about how this virus is actually spreading.
Right, and it's getting a lot of attention in the world of aerosol science because it's the so-called transmission dynamics. So it's a preprint study done in the UK, and they actually took unvaccinated volunteers and inserted some SARS-CoV-2 virus in their nose and tracked and observed them. They found a shorter incubation period than previously thought, 42 hours on average from exposure to infection. The infection first appeared in the throat of these volunteers. They found the highest viral levels in the nose. And these viral levels, you guys, peaked at 5 days, but they continued to detect high levels in some of these volunteers up to 9 to 12 days after exposure in some cases. So it's expanding our knowledge. This was not Omicron, by the way. This was the initial strain. It's expanding our knowledge about how this virus is spread.
It's amazing, 2+ years. We continue to learn so much more. And what's this now? We talk about a lot about vaccines, but a nasal vaccine?
A nasal vaccine under development in at least 12 countries, some of them in phase 3 clinical trials. Why is this appealing? It uses fewer materials, no skill required to do it, unlike some injections, much more easy and painless, obviously, for the person taking the vaccine. But from the world of science, it's where the virus actually enters our body in the nasal mucosa. So we're going to be watching that research and development pretty closely.
All right, thank you. Two things you keep an eye on for us. Thanks as always, Dr. Ash. All right, Dr. Ashton, save us by answering some of these questions, please. Up first here from some of our viewers. Hey, how likely is it if a vaccinated and boosted person gets a breakthrough case, how likely is it they spread COVID-19 to another vaccinated and boosted person?
I know people don't like to hear this, but they haven't really released this information yet. We still don't know. What we do know is that if you look at vaccinated and unvaccinated people who get infected, they have the potential to shed the virus at the same levels. That's called a cycle threshold. That's what led the CDC director back at the end of last summer to revise those mask guidelines for people who were vaccinated. When they looked at that data and they found that they were shedding similar amounts of virus, that's what caused them to revise the mask guidelines. Remember, the purpose of the vaccine is to save lives, keep people out of the hospital, and reduce the risk of severe illness. We would love it if we also got data that it reduced spread, but we don't have that data yet.
All right, next question. Is there a certain age where your metabolism slows down?
How old am I? Right. It's happening right now. No. Listen, it happens to men, and it does happen to women midlife, okay? The big kind of milestones for women, obviously perimenopause and menopause, where their testosterone level starts to drop, their lean muscle mass goes down. That can also then affect their weight and their metabolism. Of course, it happens to men as well, menopause. But there's also some big hormonal and metabolic changes, obviously, after pregnancy. So anytime you have a big reproductive change in your life as a woman, look for the metabolic. It doesn't always go hand in hand, but
that's why you always talk about lifting those weights and keeping those muscles going.
That's right.
When do you hit menopause?
I'll let you know, TJ. It hasn't happened to you yet.
But still, I need like to circle a date.
He can be kind of moody, though. Are you sure it hasn't happened yet?
I've been that way since I was 2, though.
Not touching that.
All right. Questions coming to Dr. Ashton on our Instagram at Dr. J. Ashton.
Now the story of a mom and doctor looking to her past to provide a healthier future, not only for her own kids, but for many others determined to switch out plastics from the school lunch table. Take a look.
My story starts with a group text message with my fellow pediatrician moms. In July of 2018, I received a message saying, "Have you seen the recent American Academy of Pediatrics policy? They're saying plastic is bad for our children's health and that we should instead use glass or stainless steel to serve and store food." And so while everyone was discussing their next moves as a mom, I sent a picture of the stainless steel dishes my own mother had brought from India. She had this gut instinct that the plastic chemicals were transferring into the food. And now scientific evidence proved her instincts to be right. I quickly realized that While stainless steel is the norm for Indian dining tables, there were very few options here in the USA. So I felt compelled to create a solution. As a pediatrician and mom, I knew I needed to intentionally design a product that was going to be safe and sustainable, but also engaging. So stainless steel was a great option because it had a really good safety profile. It was really important to me to find a solution to plastic because I learned that the chemicals in plastic interrupt your hormone system during crucial phases of growth and development in a child. And any sort of interruption in those can lead to issues with puberty, future fertility, obesity, and neurologic and learning disabilities, among other health issues for kids. Once I knew plastic was bad for my children's health, I thought about where else do children dine? And after our own home, they dine most frequently at school. I saw that they were eating off of reusable plastic trays that were often etched and scratched, as well as being put in the dishwasher and exposed to heat. Most parents assume BPA-free plastic is safe. Unfortunately, BPA is just one of the many chemicals found in plastic. Major organizations, American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, the World Health Organization are raising the red flags. And so I think it's one of the biggest things that no one knows about. My goal is to really change the system, change our thinking, and help parents and educators take actionable steps to decrease the impact of plastic on kids.
President Biden addressed the nation this morning, speaking about the U.S. Special Operations raid that killed the leader of ISIS in Syria. He says during the mission, the target detonated an explosive, killing himself and members of his own family, but that the U.S. did everything possible to limit civilian casualties.
Thanks to the bravery of our troops, this horrible terrorist leader is no more. Our forces carried out the operation with their signature preparation and precision, and I directed the Department of Defense to take every precaution possible to minimize civilian casualties. Knowing that this terrorist had chosen to surround himself with families, including children.
Let's bring in White House correspondent Mary Alice Parks and State Department official, former State Department official, Colonel Steve Ganyard, ABC News contributor, for more on this. Steve, we heard President Biden go over many of the atrocities that this leader was responsible for. How significant is his removal?
Yeah, Dan, you know, ISIS has sort of been, hasn't been in the headlines lately, and al-Qaeda certainly has been out of sight for quite a while. We still don't know where Zawahiri is, but if you listen to the Pentagon briefings in the past couple months, they've been very clear that ISIS remains a very potent threat and that they are reorganizing and trying to rejuvenate the organization. And so to take out the leader is a big blow to that organization. Oftentimes, it'll just be the next person up. But as the Israelis say with terrorists, it's sort of like mowing the lawn. You need to take out who you can, when you can, but you have to be prepared that the organization will eventually rejuvenate itself, and there'll be somebody to pick up the mantle.
Mary Alice, what can you tell us about how this raid was planned and ultimately executed? It sounded like the president wanted to make very clear today that they did try to limit civilian casualties, despite the fact that it sounds like some were killed.
Diane, that's right. And that was exactly the message from senior administration officials that briefed reporters this morning. They said that they started planning this operation back in December, but that the president gave the green light on Tuesday in a conversation in the Oval Office, and then overnight was being briefed and getting real-time updates following along with his vice president and members of his national security team in the Situation Room. One bit of color, they said that when the operation was finally done, the president said, "God bless our troops," before going upstairs, and then received continued updates throughout the night from his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. And you're right, this morning the senior administration officials said exactly the same, that they took extreme measures to try to limit any civilian casualties. That's first reflected just in the fact that this was sort of a manned mission, that we put U.S. troops there in harm's way on the ground instead of carrying out a drone strike. But more than that, there was a conversation about how they worked to get civilians out of the first floor of this residential building. They knew the target was on the third floor, and they worked to clear those lower floors to try to get civilians civilians out of the way. This is, again, according to the government officials, that they made loud, audible announcements in the area to try to get people to leave. That's pretty normal with a mission like this, but to, again, try to tell people what's going on who might, to make sure that people are inadvertently sort of mixed up in this. And then they did a lot this morning to point the finger back at the target, to say that the civilian casualties that were caused there on the ground were the result of his actions, that he detonated an explosive, killing, they actually used the word murdering, his own family and other residents in the building, because the U.S. forces, according, again, to administration officials, were doing everything they could to limit civilian casualties.
And Steve, President Biden said that, quote, this operation is a testament to America's reach and capability to take out terrorist threats no matter where they try to hide anywhere in the world. Do you think we can expect to see more operations like this one in the future?
Yeah, I think, Diane, if you think about it, this is very much like some of the other high-value targets that the Special Operations Command has taken out. Go back to the bin Laden raid. Remember that the bin Laden family was living in a multi-story building that looked very much like this one. Then remember Baghdadi, who was head of ISIS, was also caught in a building like this, and he too ended up blowing up innocent people. So maybe there was a realization that bin Laden got taken alive, or at least they entered the house in a way that Baghdadi and Qureshi didn't want to happen. But these kinds of raids, as Mary Alice alluded to, these kinds of raids take months to plan, because the U.S., frankly, I mean, the U.S. gets a lot of heat for civilian casualties. But I can assure you that at the military level, every effort is made to minimize civilian casualties. And so in this case, I would imagine that they would have wanted to get al-Qureshi alive just for the intelligence value. The fact that he blew himself up along with his family took out a treasure trove of intelligence that they could have gotten from him or from some of the computers that might have been around him. So it's these kinds of things are very, very tough. They take a long time. The intelligence takes a long time to develop. The U.S. Special Operations Command wants to be absolutely sure of the target being there and to minimize civilian casualties. But I think going forward, eventually, that unfortunately, that ISIS will rejuvenate in some capacity, and these kinds of raids will continue.
All right, Mary Alice Parks and Steve Ganyard, thank you both. We appreciate it. A 500-acre section of an ancient redwood forest in Northern California is being returned to the native tribes whose ancestors protected it generations ago, before they were forced to leave. The land, known as the Fish Run Place, was purchased by the conservation group Save the Redwoods League and will now be placed in the care of the Intertribal Sinkyone Wilderness Council. Sam Hodder, president of Save the Redwoods League, joins me now for more on this. Sam, thanks for being here. Can you give us an idea of just how significant this forest is to the indigenous tribes of the area?
Absolutely. And Diane, thank you so much for having me. And this property actually was closer to $3 million. It was a critical property in the heart of the indigenous territories of the Sinkyone people. So it's also a critical piece of a expanded area of conservation land that is known as the Lost Coast. And this is right in the heart of California's redwood forest, which, as you know, extends from Big Sur up to the Oregon border. What many people know about the redwood forest is how extraordinary it is, how these are the tallest trees in the world, and how they can grow to be over 2,000 years old. But what many people don't know is that California's redwood forest is a critical ingredient in the fight against climate change, because a mature coast redwood forest can sequester more carbon than any other forest in the world. So to collaborate with and join with the indigenous people that are the original stewards of these lands as part of the healing of the forest and the healing of the culture and community that links us to land, it really is an extraordinary conservation opportunity.
So what went into this decision to transfer ownership back to the tribes?
Well, the Sinkyone Intertribal Wilderness Council was established as a consortium of federally recognized tribes from this region to do exactly this, to protect and restore nature and to heal the cultural connections between indigenous communities, and this landscape. So we had a shared vision in helping nature to heal in this redwood landscape. So the opportunity to convey this property back to Indigenous stewardship and to accomplish together through a collaborative approach to the stewardship of the redwood forest here was a way to achieve our organizational mission to protect and restore the redwood forest and to connect people to their peace and beauty.
So how will this deal affect who can visit the forest and who can use its resources?
Well, this property is very remote. It's in a section of the California coast that's called the Lost Coast for good reason. It's really hard to get there. There are very few roads. It's very wild. It's very rugged. It's very beautiful. But the objective of this conservation project was not so much recreation or public access. It really is about healing the ecosystem, including the communities of that ecosystem, so that this forest land could heal and be protected.
All right, Sam Hodder, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane.
And let's bring in ABC News contributor Elizabeth Newman, a former Homeland Security official in the Trump administration, for more on this. Elizabeth, how significant is this operation, taking out the leader of ISIS?
Well, Diane, certainly 2 years ago when we took out al-Baghdadi, that was extremely significant. The funny thing about Qurashi is that there's just not that much known about him. In fact, in the early days when he was appointed supposedly as the leader of the caliphate, it was questionable whether he even existed. There were a lot of rumors that he was not real, that he was a made-up person. Clearly, that has proven not to be the case, as we now have evidence that he has been killed. But that kind of tells you a little bit about where we are with ISIS. They do still pose a threat regionally. They do run raids and cause a lot of problems in the Syria and northern Iraq areas, but they're just not the threat that they were 5 years ago. So it's good that we took care of him, and every time that we can diminish ISIS's capabilities is a good thing. It's not nearly as significant as the killing of al-Baghdadi a couple of years ago.
So what does this mean for ISIS now? Is there someone always in line to take over? How does that part work?
Usually there is. As we saw with al-Baghdadi, it appears that he actually handpicked Qurashi to be his successor. So within a week of Baghdadi dying, the council came together and formally appointed Qurashi as the new caliph. So I would expect that we would see some attempt at doing a similar activity and naming a new person, but they are weaker. They do not have the capabilities that they once did, and you know, we need to keep putting the pressure on them. That's why it's important that we maintain some presence in that part of the world. So they will continue to try to do what they are trying to do, wreak havoc in that part of the world. But I just don't see this as anything but a further example of their diminishing capabilities.
How much concern does this raise in terms of potential retaliation?
Well, we always are concerned. This part of the country, and Qurashi is actually a great example. He was originally a part of he was an Iraqi officer under Saddam Hussein. Then he became a part of al-Qaeda. Then he supposedly worked to help the U.S. government during parts of the fight in Iraq. And then he joined ISIS in 2014. It is kind of well known that in that part of the world, your alliances and your loyalties shift. The problem with that part of the world is a lot of our biggest threats to the homeland have emanated from there. A lot of ideas about how to try to infiltrate our aviation system or how to get people into the homeland. So I do remain concerned that there are people in that part of the world with the intent and desire to cause harm to the U.S. homeland. Thankfully, a lot of our defenses are so much stronger than they used to be, but we have to stay vigilant. And certainly after an attack like this, it does often create cause for certain individuals, especially those that might be here in the homeland already that are sympathetic to ISIS, not members of ISIS, but maybe sympathetic to the cause. This type of thing can sometimes lead to somebody attempting some sort of retaliatory act. So it's definitely a good time for law enforcement to be vigilant.
So, Elizabeth, how much preparation goes into a mission like this, not just on the tactical side of things, but also the decision to move forward?
Oh, I mean, these men and women that are in the special forces are quite phenomenal at what they do. You may remember, and Martha referenced it before, the Bin Laden raid, and they build up mock-ups of what they think they will be, what the interior of the building is that they will be having to go into. And what we saw in this raid, from what we have gathered so far, is they made a point to go in with not just do this through aerial attacks. They had boots on the ground to be able to make sure that they got him. That's really important because you don't want to have a false claim that he is dead and then he shows up again. That obviously defeats some of not only your intent to take him out, but it also it has a psychological impact on those who are siding with ISIS. So it's really important that when you say that he is dead, that he is in fact dead. So that's why they needed to put boots on the ground. So they do a ton of preparation and build up mock-ups of what the building might be like. They, I'm assuming, probably knew that there were going to be what we consider civilians, though I would assume that's probably family members. So there's an argument to be made whether they are truly civilian. But, it is sad. It is sad to hear that there were children and women that were killed. But the special forces are prepared for that. They know that that's probably what they are walking into. We know that these terrorists tend to take a lot of wives, tend to have a lot of children, and also use women and children to protect themselves. So there's not usually a lot of options. And doing it at night usually reduces the loss of life, protects our soldiers, but still very sad to see that we had women and children killed.
All right, Elizabeth Newman, always great to have your analysis. Elizabeth, thank you.
Mary Bruce for more on this. We know we're going to be hearing from President Biden shortly. He's been tracking this for a long time as well.
Yeah, George, we are told that the president, that this order was taken at his, that this mission was taken at his direct order. The president has been briefed on this for the last several weeks, we are told. And we know, we've seen the photo, the president monitoring this situation overnight in the Situation Room there alongside the vice president. The president putting out a statement earlier saying that this operation will make the world a safer place, thanking and praising the skill and bravery of our armed forces. And George, it is clear that this mission was complicated by the presence of civilians. I am told that as the raid was beginning, the ISIS leader detonated a bomb that killed himself and members of his own family, that he was using these civilians as a human shield. The White House making it clear that any casualties of civilians was due to the terrorist leader, and that they are calling this a cowardly terrorist tactic, George.
Mary Bruce, as Martha said, this was reminiscent of the raid that took out Osama bin Laden when President Biden was vice president. We know he was famously skeptical of that raid.
Yeah, he was. And George, I can only imagine that the presence of civilians were something that weighed heavily on the president as he was deciding to take this action. But as you mentioned, this was something that he had been briefed on for several weeks, we believe, the president then making the order earlier this week.
And in his meeting with New York Mayor Eric Adams, the president is expected to touch on the spike in gun violence across the country. At least 9 major cities have broken homicide records in the last year. In New York, thousands of police officers lined the streets paying tribute to one of their own who was shot and killed. And in Virginia, the community at Bridgewater College is remembering 2 campus police officers shot and killed on Tuesday. Also, Little Rock, Arkansas, the city declared violent crime a public health emergency after at least 10 people were injured in shootings this past weekend. Former NYPD Chief of Detectives and ABC News contributor Robert Boyce is here now with a little bit more on this. Chief Boyce, thanks for joining me. What do you want to hear today from President Biden as he sort of opens up a little bit about his strategy to combat gun violence?
Good morning, Diane. It's good to be with you. What we want to hear, and importantly, Merrick Garland is coming with him, is we need federal resources. We need partnerships to combat this thing. We've been dealing with the iron pipeline now for decades. With really, it's just ramping up more than ever now. The nation is awash in shooting incidents, high profile, innocent people being shot. We need help here. We're up 32% in shootings so far this year. And here's a big statistic as well. 6 police officers shot so far this year in New York City. We're a little over a month into it. 2 were murdered. This is how bad it was. It is. So we're looking for some federal help. some legislation key to stopping those out-of-state firearms coming into New York City. And there's some things they can do. But most importantly, we need federal partnerships to combat this.
Now, as a former NYPD chief of detectives, what was your reaction when you heard about the deaths of officers Mora and Rivera, who were killed in the line of duty?
It breaks your heart, and all those things that you've experienced in your career come flooding back to you. So these officers were just wonderful men, young men, cut down in the prime of life. Never should have happened by a stolen gun from Baltimore coming up into New York City. What the feds can do is make interstate transportation of stolen firearms in New York a federal crime. We need this in the honor of these two officers, and they were great people. It's exactly what we want in New York City. Children of New York City going on to be police officers and doing a great job for us. So it breaks your heart. I've been there before, and it's painful each time, Diane.
Wilbert Mora's sister also said how many more officers will have to lose their lives for this system to change. What is it about the system that you think needs to change or that is allowing this to happen right now?
Sure, I know what she's talking about, and she's exactly correct. Gun violence, people are being arrested for gun possession, illegal gun possession, put it right back out in the street. We see a prime example of that in the Bronx. The same day we're preparing for a funeral, they let a shooter out, a judge on bail, which he paid for, out back on the street, a gang member in the Bronx, 16 years old, putting him back in that environment that got him to be arrested twice for guns already. It's just a cycle that we can't have. It's exacting a lot of violence in the city. It needs to change. So prosecutors, when you have someone in possession of a gun, you can't put them back in the community, but without any crime, without any punishment at all. That's what's happening.
All right. Former NYPD Chief of Detectives, Robert Boyce. Always great to have you, Robert. Thank you.
Diane.
Aw, let's get you lovebirds flying. Book with Priceline and you save more, so you can more. Ah. I'll see you at the hotel. Priceline. Every trip is a big deal.
We're going to turn now to our other top story. At least 37 states on alert for dangerous weather as that massive winter storm moves across the country. More than 3,000 flights already canceled, millions bracing for dangerous conditions on the roads. As you can imagine, our team is out there in the storm zone tracking it all. And we're going to start with Trevor Ault, who's in snowy Cleveland. Good morning, Trevor.
Good morning, Robin. So this is just the beginning of what's going to be a full day of constant snowfall, 10 inches possible here in Cleveland. The wind is doing us no favors, and the roads you can see behind me are already really messy, even if they've been plowed. I mean, this street here was just plowed a couple minutes ago, and you want to talk about a blanketing storm. There's 88 counties in Ohio. All 88 of them are under winter storm warnings, and now we're looking at a significant day of results after we already saw significant impacts in several other states overnight.
Overnight, parts of the Midwest getting hammered with more than 14 inches of snow. Plows out all night trying to keep up with the snowfall. Overnight in Ohio, school districts and colleges proactively shutting down with 10 inches of snow expected today. Conditions causing mayhem for motorists.
It is wet, heavy snow.
In Oklahoma City, the icy, slick conditions causing chaos on the roads, abandoned cars left in ditches, drivers stuck for hours. Westbound lanes on Interstate 74 in Champaign, Illinois, blocked with jackknife tractor trailers. Crews working throughout the night to get the morning rush hour moving.
They're forcing everybody off the interstate.
Those treacherous conditions forcing Good Samaritans into action. This group of 3 working together to get this driver moving again. Despite cautionary signs out, highways and roads across the Midwest are a mess with wreck after wreck.
And this snow was preceded by hours of rainfall that made it basically impossible to effectively pre-treat the roads. Now all of that rain is freezing on the roads. The snow then piles up on top of it. This morning, crews are trying to get some salt down, but this is going to be an uphill battle all day. Michael?
Yeah, it's a big battle there indeed, Trevor. Thank you so much. And now let's go to Maria Villarreal in Dallas, Texas, where they are expecting snow and dangerous ice there. Good morning, Maria.
Hey, good morning, Michael. We are getting pelted with another round of freezing sleet. Let me tell you, it does not feel good. If you take a look behind me, you can see this is what has happened over the last 14 hours or so. A consistent amount of both rain and sleet hitting the North Texas area. Over my right-hand shoulder, this is the infamous Mixmaster. This is where several highways meet in the downtown area, and a lot of cars, and especially 18-wheelers, get stuck up on these ramps. The concern will be later on today when we see the snow hit this area, because you're going to have another layer of snow over what's already accumulated, and that buildup is what officials are very concerned about. Also a concern are the power outages. Good news is right now we only have just over 20,000 without power, but in comparison to what we saw last year, we're really hoping that everything stays clear on the grid. Again, we'll keep you posted, but more to come later on this morning in this North Texas area. Michael?
All right, a lot of complications coming from the storm. Thank you so much, Maria. And St. Louis is expecting about a half a foot of snow. That's where Ginger is this morning, tracking this monster storm. And Ginger, the wind chill there is close to 0.
Oh, and it's not even the big, I mean, it has been so cold for so many. It's going to get even deeper in that Arctic air by tomorrow. But you would see the iconic Gateway Arch behind me if it were not snowing. Even if it were light, you wouldn't see it because we have got so much snow coming down. Now the snow, the couple of inches we've gotten, is on top of a full inch of crushed ice, like freezing rain and sleet that came in yesterday with round 1. Let me take you to the maps real quick and just get an idea of what's happening. If you were to drive from the Rio Grande all the way up to the Canadian border, you would be in a winter storm warning the entire time. What I am most concerned about today is the accretion of ice in this area, anywhere from Greenville, Mississippi to Memphis and Paducah, Lexington, Evansville, Indiana, and we will be timing it all out for coming up, George.
Some tough conditions in so much of the country. Okay, Ginger, thanks.
Aw, let's get you lovebirds flying. Book with Priceline and you save more, so you can more. Ah. I'll see you at the hotel. Priceline. Every trip is a big deal.
President Biden has ordered 3,000 U.S. troops to Eastern Europe as Russia masses forces around Ukraine and accuses the U.S. of fueling military tension. Senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell is on the scene. Good morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning, George. That's right. This is an important, if largely symbolic, show of force to try and support America's allies, deter Russian aggression in nearby Ukraine. But make no mistake, this is also a high-risk strategy.
This morning, at President Biden's order, 3,000 American troops are preparing to head to Eastern Europe and Germany, deploying in the coming days in a show of support for NATO allies.
The current situation demands that we reinforce the deterrent and defensive posture on NATO's eastern flank.
1,000 troops based in Germany will head to Romania. 2,000 troops will move from Fort Bragg in North Carolina to Poland and Germany. Biden's ruled out sending troops to Ukraine, and these deployments are not permanent. But they are in addition to the 8,500 troops that have already been placed on high alert as part of a NATO rapid response force. We asked the White House what changed, why the president decided to move U.S. troops unilaterally.
This has been under discussion for some time now. There's no question that Russia and President Putin has continued to take escalatory, not de-escalatory steps.
Russia responding, calling the movement of American forces destructive steps that increase military tension. The Kremlin insists it has no plans to attack, but new satellite images show Russian forces growing north of Ukraine, part of more than 100,000 troops now positioned around Ukraine's borders.
Well, the Kremlin's reacted again, unsurprisingly saying the deployment will only add fuel to the tensions. This move seems designed to force Putin to make concessions and withdraw his forces, but Michael, there's no guarantee it's going to succeed.
All right, Ian, thank you so much for bringing that to us. To a sudden exit for the head of CNN, the network's president, Jeff Zucker, resigning after an investigation revealed he failed to disclose a romantic relationship with another executive. Ariel Reshef has the latest.
This morning, one of the most influential figures in news, Jeff Zucker, out as president of CNN, resigning after failing to disclose his romantic relationship with the woman he calls his closest colleague.
We have news now to report involving our network. CNN President Jeff Zucker has just resigned after disclosing a consensual relationship with a colleague.
In an email to CNN employees, Zucker, who helmed the news organization for 9 years, writing, "I acknowledge the relationship evolved in recent years. I was required to disclose it when it began, but I didn't. I was wrong."
His resignation is stunning this newsroom and the news industry.
Zucker's secret relationship with CNN's executive vice president and chief marketing officer Allison Gollust uncovered during the investigation into former CNN primetime anchor Chris Cuomo. Cuomo fired from the network last December over his involvement in his brother, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's efforts to fight sexual harassment allegations. Zucker, who recruited Cuomo in 2013, was also the one who let him go 8 years later. Gollust briefly worked for Governor Cuomo prior to joining CNN. In a statement of her own, Gollust revealing her professional relationship with her CNN boss changed during COVID, adding, "I regret that we didn't disclose it at the right time."
The two worked together for 20 years at various networks. Gollust says she plans to remain at CNN. Robin?
Ariel, thank you so much.
The latest now on Facebook. The company's stock plunged overnight after reporting a big decline in daily users for the first time in its 18-year run. Our chief business correspondent Rebecca Jarvis is tracking this developing story. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning to you, George. And Facebook, which recently changed its name to Meta, shares wiped out almost $175 billion in value overnight. The stock down 20%. If this holds throughout the day, it will be the worst day ever for the company's stock. And here's why. Facebook has been adding users consistently since it started in 2004, but they seem to have hit a wall. In fact, Facebook lost 1 million daily active users in the most recent quarter as it struggles to stay relevant with younger users. The company is also dealing with privacy issues. They say inflation is weighing on investor spending, advertiser spending, and founder and CEO Mark Zuckerberg is betting big on the metaverse. He's expected to invest billions of dollars to build out his company's capabilities there, but we've yet to see a real impact from that business, and we probably won't for a while. And guys, this is weighing on the whole stock market given the size of Facebook.
It really is. All right, Rebecca, thanks for coming in for that. That lawsuit by former NFL coach Brian Flores alleging racial discrimination in hiring across the league. Flores also alleges he was offered $100,000 per game to tank games. Victor Oquendo has the latest.
This morning, former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores not backing down after filing that bombshell racial discrimination lawsuit. The NFL calling the claims without merit. Flores arguing that 70% of the players in the league are black, but of the 32 NFL teams, only one currently has a black head coach. Flores alleges his former boss, New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, told him that the New York Giants had decided to hire Brian Daboll as their new head coach days before Flores was scheduled to interview for the job.
There's a humiliation that came over me, and then there was a little bit of your anger. You know, why wouldn't I afford the opportunity to truly interview and show what I can do?
Marvin Lewis, who became head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals the year the Rooney Rule was enacted, which required teams to interview a minority candidate for top positions, says the policy should have been a catalyst for change.
We had opportunity and we felt like we were making strides as minority coaches. And then obviously over the last 3 to 4 hiring cycles, we've gone back the other way. And this one is going in the same direction or worse.
In his suit, Flores also takes aim at the Miami Dolphins, which fired him after leading the team to back-to-back winning seasons. Flores says during his first season, he was allegedly offered $100,000 to tank games by owner Stephen Ross, an offer Flores says he declined. The NFL vowing to investigate, but Ross calling the allegations false, malicious, and defamatory, adding, "I welcome that investigation, and I am eager to defend my personal integrity and the integrity and values of the entire Miami Dolphins organization." Despite the lawsuit, Flores says he hopes to one day coach again in the NFL, but he knows there's a chance his career is over.
If my career is torpedoed and there's change, it'll be worth it.
After the lawsuit came out, the NFL said that the allegations were, quote, without merit. But now ESPN is reporting that that was in response to the claims of racial discrimination in their hiring practices. And the league will now investigate to see if Stephen Ross offered Brian Flores money to lose games. George?
What a story. Okay, Victor, thanks very much.
To the new body cam video released in the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew, showing police discovering the first evidence in the search for the Colorado mom who went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Her husband has been charged with her murder. Our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, joins us now with more on that video. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Robin. Since Suzanne Morphew disappeared on Mother's Day 2020, barely a trace of the mother of two has been found. Not her wallet, not her phone, not her body. And that body cam video shows those first crucial hours of the investigation and the first clues that would eventually lead police to accuse her husband of drugging her, murdering her, and then staging it to look like maybe a mountain lion had killed her.
Suzanne!
This morning, that newly released body camera footage revealing the crucial first hours of the investigation into the disappearance of Colorado mom Suzanne Morphew, who went missing back on Mother's Day in 2020.
Suzanne?
The just-released footage was submitted last August as evidence against her husband, Barry Morphew, now charged with first-degree murder. As night falls, Barry arrives on the scene and asks about the first piece of evidence authorities found, Suzanne's blue bike.
Where is it? Where's the bike? Oh, it's right there. Where was it? It was like just right down here in this little embankment.
And he even asks if a mountain lion may have gotten her.
Was it a crash? The way it was laying, it kind of looked like it, but there's not really that much damage to the bike.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like
was lion. No lion? Mountain lion?
Investigators offered another theory, that he drugged and murdered her and hid the evidence. You can later hear investigators instructing him not to touch her bicycle.
Hey, could you not touch the bike with your hands, please?
Earlier in the day, the footage shows a young man who identifies himself as one of Suzanne's daughter's boyfriends meeting an officer in the driveway after arriving at the Morphew's house to look for Suzanne, who investigators say had been having a 2-year-long extramarital affair.
Have you looked in the house for
I have, yep.
All right, you looked through everything?
Yes.
You haven't found her?
No.
The young man says he also searched for the 49-year-old in his car. And when asked if he'd checked a trail nearby, he shares that it would be out of character for her to have gone up there.
Well, she hasn't, and I haven't checked there yet because that climb at the beginning is really hard. Someone needs to go there, I think.
But that is where Suzanne's bike was found. Later, when investigators ask him about Barry and Suzanne's relationship, he answers hesitantly, looking to his father for approval before speaking.
Did Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well?
You can answer honestly. You know, I think they've had some problems. Normal husband and wife type deals.
So far, the couple's daughters have been supportive of their father, seen arriving in court alongside Barry Morphew, who has pleaded not guilty. Now he'll be back in court later this month. It'll be a different courtroom and a different venue, a judge granting a motion to change venue because of all of the pre-trial publicity. Michael.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much.
We are back with the college tennis coach who served 6 months in prison in the Varsity Blues admissions scandal. He sat down for an exclusive interview with TJ Helms. Good morning, TJ.
Hey, George, good morning. And this coach said he was under intense pressure to raise money for the university and for his tennis program. Somebody came up to him and said, hey, we can get some donations if you admit this kid as a tennis recruit. So the coach went along, didn't think he was doing anything fraudulent, certainly not committing a crime, until someone showed up at an airport and handed him a bag with $60,000 cash in it.
They put me on suicide watch, and I was sitting in this cell. It was tough.
If you didn't accept that bag of cash, you think you would have gone to prison? Is that money the thing that really got you?
I've thought about that a lot. That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that.
Former University of Texas tennis coach Michael Center is reflecting on his 6 months in prison, his mistakes, namely accepting $60,000 in cash, and his role in the Varsity Blues college scandal.
There were some mistakes that I made. I own my mistakes. I'm not saying I was perfect in this situation at all, but I never imagined that I was committing a crime, that I would go to prison, that I would carry a felony.
Center is just one of dozens involved in a nationwide college admissions scheme that was headed by Rick Singer, who attempted to gain admission for his clients' children at prestigious universities in exchange for donations. Some of those parents included actresses Felicity Huffman, who served 2 weeks in prison, and Lori Loughlin, who served 2 months. Center spent 18 seasons as head coach for the successful Longhorns tennis program. But before his 19th season in 2014, Center says he got a call about helping a student get into the university as a tennis recruit, though he never intended to play tennis. In exchange, Singer, the college scandal mastermind, would funnel donations to the school and the tennis program.
Is there anyone or who was aware at the university that you were asking and that they were admitting a student as a tennis recruit that they knew absolutely 100% had no intention of participating in tennis?
It's a very extensive vetting process that goes through. And if at any point in time, the university thought that it was inappropriate for him to sign a letter of intent and become the basketball manager, they had every right to question me or ask me. But no one at any point in time ever came to my office, texted me, called me, notified me.
The university telling Dallas Morning News last month, we found no other student athlete was improperly admitted, adding that an independent internal review found that no staff other than Center were aware of the illegal acts. But Center met Singer at an airport parking lot where he says he was handed a bag with $60,000 in cash, money he says he initially hid in the basement. But Center maintains he only agreed because of pressure to raise money for his tennis program.
This started because I wanted tennis courts. I wanted a facility. I wanted to be able to attract the athletes and train the athletes, and I wanted to have a successful team. I felt a lot of pressure to raise a lot of money. And there were a lot of people that were asking me and others to raise money. And when that money came in, they were happy. No one complained.
It wasn't until 2018 when the coach says he received a call from Singer that, unbeknownst to him, was being recorded by the FBI. 5 months later, they'd raid his home as part of Operation Varsity Blues. Center pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit mail fraud and honest services mail fraud.
Where do you go from here?
If I let this beat me, then I'm not being the person that I want to be. I'm not being the person I want to be to my children. I need to show them when you get knocked down that you have to be able to get back up.
And again, he said that money he got was not a part of an initial negotiation. They just showed up later and said, hey, here's your cut. And he made a mistake and took the money. We do know at least 10 coaches, about 30 parents have been convicted and sentenced. And get this, guys, his tennis program, 2019, his men's program won the national championship. That's the year the scandal broke. And he couldn't be there to be a part of that team that he built.
Punishment enough right there. All right. Thank you so much, TJ.